Before we begin, let me ask you something. What would you do if the richest woman in the entire building walked in looking like she had nothing and no one? Absolutely no one would help her. What if the only person who treated her like a human being was the janitor everyone else overlooked? Tonight's story begins with a misunderstanding so simple and ends with a transformation so powerful it might just change the way you see the people around you. If you love stories that touch the heart, spark compassion, and remind us that kindness still exists in the quietest corners of life, take a moment to subscribe before we begin, so you won't miss the next journey waiting for you. Now, let's step into the story. No one helped the Chinese billionaire. Until the janitor greeted her in Chinese rain, hammered the streets of Manhattan as if the sky itself had lost patience. The night wind whistled through the narrow alley, slicing against the skin like a cold reprimand. Inside the grand marble lobby of Aurora Tower, the storm was only a distant soundtrack, a muffled roar trapped behind revolving glass doors. But when the door spun open with a violent push of wind, that fragile barrier between two worlds shattered. A woman stumbled in. Her footsteps dragged water across the polished floor, forming a thin, trembling trail behind her. She clutched a worn canvas bag to her chest as if it held the last warm piece of her life. Her coat, threadbare, soaked, misshapen, let out a soft squelch with every move. The faint smell of damp fabric drifted into the lobby's lavender-scented air. For a moment, no one spoke. They simply stared. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect curls and perfect eyeliner, wrinkled her nose before her lips even parted. A security guard, big shoulders and bigger suspicions, shifted his stance. A few late-night office workers dressed in tailored suits and glossy shoes paused mid-sentence and slowly stepped back as though poverty itself might stain their collars. The woman lifted her head. Rainwater dripped from her hair, sliding past her cheeks. She tried to steady her breathing, but each inhale sounded faint and uneven. "Excuse me." Her English was soft-accented, careful. "May I have just a little water? Only need a place to wait until the rain is gone. Please." Her voice barely carried across the marble expanse, but even if it had, the room's temperature had already dropped emotionally, if not physically. The receptionist leaned forward, lowering her voice as if the woman were contagious. "This is not a shelter, ma'am. You can't stay here." The woman swallowed hard. "Just a moment. I am very tired." The security guard stepped in his boots, clicking sharply. "Ma'am, I need you to leave. Right now." He didn't bother hiding the irritation in his tone. People like her always meant paperwork, reports, disruptions. The woman gripped the counter for balance. Her fingers trembled. A dull pressure began to pulse in her chest, a warning, a fear she recognized too well. "Stay calm," she told herself. "Don't fall. Don't make a scene. Just breathe." But her heart thudded unevenly like a drum out of rhythm. "Please," she whispered, "just a place to sit. It's too cold out there." "No," the guard snapped. "You're disturbing the tenants." Another worker walked by, holding a briefcase worth more than her entire outfit. He muttered, "This city is crawling with them," not bothering to disguise the disgust in his voice. The woman winced not at the words but at how familiar they felt. She tightened her hold on her canvas bag, her breath turning shallow. The guard reached for her arm. And that was the moment everything shifted. A low, calm voice rose from the far corner of the lobby near the janitorial cart where no one ever looked unless they needed a spill cleaned up. "Nin Hao," the man said gently. Then, slower, warm as a hand placed softly on a frightened shoulder, "Nin, Shuyao, Bang Mang, Ma." The woman froze. Her eyes, still clouded with exhaustion, widened with disbelief. It had been years since anyone in America spoke to her in Mandarin, and certainly never in a place like this. The janitor stepped out from the shadows of fluorescent light. He held a simple mop in one hand, a pair of work gloves tucked into his belt. His uniform was worn from countless washes, his sleeves rolled up to his forearms. His posture tired, but his presence steady, like someone who had learned how to carry more than he ever said aloud. He spoke again, this time softer, as if offering a lifeline. "Would you like some warm water?" Warm water. Not just water. Warm something no one here had thought she deserved. The lobby fell silent. Even the storm outside felt quieter. The security guard frowned. "Sir, this doesn't concern." But the janitor didn't break eye contact with the woman. "Mei Guanxi," he told her. "It's okay." Then he lifted his chin toward the security guard with a calm firmness. "I can take her to the back hallway for a moment. She's soaked. She just needs to warm up. It won't bother anyone." The receptionist huffed. "This isn't protocol." "No," the janitor agreed gently, "but she's a person." A few suits scoffed. One whispered, "Let the janitor handle it. He probably relates." But the woman didn't hear them anymore. Her gaze was locked onto the man who'd spoken to her in the language of home. A language that carried memories of childhood lanterns, steamed rice, her mother's gentle lullabies. Things she thought she'd buried under 20 years of boardrooms and cold skyscrapers. Tears stung the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. Not here. Not in front of them. The janitor stepped closer, careful not to make her feel cornered. "Come with me," he said in English this time, slow and respectful. "It's warmer in the service hallway." The woman hesitated, knees beginning to wobble. She pressed a hand to her chest, another ripple of pain tightening beneath her ribs. The janitor noticed instantly. "You hurt." His voice shifted, still calm but sharper with concern. She managed a thin answer. "Just tired." The guard crossed his arms. "Sir, I don't think the janitor met his gaze. Not defiant, simply resolute. She's not harming anyone. Let me help." And there was something in his tone, something steady, quietly unwavering, that made the guard step back. The woman inhaled a shaky breath, then another. Slowly, she let go of the counter. As the janitor guided her toward the side hallway, the distant hum of rain filtered through the glass. Each step felt surreal. She didn't know this man. He didn't know her. But for the first time all night, someone wasn't looking at her like a problem to remove. She whispered in Mandarin, barely audible, "Wei Shenmei. Ni yuan yi bang wo. Why are you willing to help me?" He gave a small, tired smile. "Because someone should have helped my mother," he said. And no one did. Her breath caught. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see his face fully. The kindness there was not loud, not performative. It was the quiet kind, the kind that grows from wounds. And as the storm raged outside, the voice of the narrator rises. No one in that gleaming tower knew the truth. The woman they pushed away was not homeless. She was the billionaire who owned the building, and the janitor who offered her warm water had just changed both of their lives. Hours before the rain slammed against the glass doors of Aurora Tower, hours before, a janitor's soft Mandarin cut through a lobby full of cold stares. Zhao Xinyi sat in a room so quiet she could hear her own heart misbehave. The cardiology clinic was the kind of place where fear wore silk gloves. Machines hummed softly behind closed doors. The chairs were cushioned enough that even anxiety sank without a sound. Her doctor closed the file with a gentle thud that still made her flinch. "Miss Zhao," he said, voice steady but heavy, "your heart rhythm is highly unstable. Arrhythmia. Long-term stress. You've been pushing your body for years." She stared at his tie because looking at his eyes felt dangerous. He continued, slower this time. "If you don't slow down, truly slow down, not just take a weekend off, you may have 1 or 2 years before the damage becomes irreversible." The word irreversible seemed to echo off the walls. Her pulse fluttered in her throat, then stumbled. She could hear it in her own ears, too fast, too hard, like someone knocking on a door from the inside. She forced her voice to stay level. "Is medication enough?" "Medication will help," he said, "but it won't save you if you keep living like this. Your body is waving a red flag. You cannot run at this speed anymore. Run. That was what she'd always done. From poverty, from doubt, from grief. She nodded, but the truth only slid across the surface of her mind, not yet sinking in. I understand. He didn't look convinced. You need more than pills, Miss Zhao. You need a different life. A different life. The phrase lodged in her chest like a foreign object. When she stepped out of the clinic, the air outside was cool and damp. The city hadn't fully woken up yet. Delivery trucks rumbled. A siren wailed faintly in the distance. Somewhere, a street vendor rattled metal trays. Her driver hurried to open the limo door. Ma'am, she didn't get in. She stood on the sidewalk, letting the drizzle touch her face, feeling both too old and too young at the same time, too young to be talking about her heart, giving out too old to pretend she still had forever. Inside the car, her phone buzzed nonstop. Calendar alerts, board updates, messages from lawyers and bankers, 12 emails from her assistant, all tagged urgent. She slid into the back seat but didn't pick it up. In the tinted reflection of the window, a woman stared back. 45, impeccably groomed, perfectly composed, completely alone, no partner, no children, no parents left to call. Her life was a string of contracts, not conversations, flights, not friendships. She owned entire skylines, yet there was no one whose voice she longed to hear at the end of the day. What am I doing all this for? She wondered. And when I die, who will actually care? Office, ma'am, her driver asked gently. She could picture it, glass walls, polished conference tables, people waiting to ask her for more decisions, more sign-offs, more pieces of her life. Home, she said instead. Home. The elevator opened directly into her penthouse on the top floor of Aurora Tower, the building everyone called a monument to her success. The doors slid shut behind her with a soft hiss, sealing her alone in a vast silence. The apartment was beautiful, but the beauty sounded lonely. The distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft buzz of the HVAC, the muffled city far below. No clink of dishes from a kitchen shared. No television murmuring in another room. No footsteps. She set her phone face down on the marble counter and began removing her jewelry piece by piece. Diamond studs, a heavy watch, pearl bracelet. Each item made a small sound as it touched the stone, tiny metallic taps like a polite knock on an empty house. Last came her mother's jade ring. She paused, thumb resting against the smooth, cool surface. The ring was the only thing she wore that wasn't a transaction. She slid it off slowly and set it apart from the others. The penthouse echoed back nothing. She sank onto the couch. Her phone lit up again, meeting reminders, investment reports, invitations to galas. A digital avalanche of importance. Her heart felt like a locked room with the lights off. She closed her eyes and, without meaning to, drifted backward into a memory. China. Years ago. The sound of birds in the courtyard. The soft scratch of a brush against paper. The quiet, patient voice of her mother behind her. Xinyi. Her mother would whisper as they traced graceful characters together. Strength and kindness are not enemies. You can be both. From inside the house, her father's voice had carried like a gavel. You're wasting time. She needs to study, not play with ink. He never raised his hand, but his words were sharp enough. After her mother died when Xinyi was 13, softness disappeared from the house like a light switched off. Her father filled every minute with lessons, economics, negotiation, market strategy. He praised her when she was ruthless, corrected her when she hesitated, rewarded her when she won. Kindness makes you weak, he told her. Remember that if you want to survive. So she did. She learned to close doors before anyone could walk through them, to smile without revealing anything, to offer deals, not vulnerability. Money became armor. Power became oxygen. But standing there now in her silent penthouse with the doctor's words still ringing in her ears, the armor felt heavy. The oxygen tasted thin. She walked toward a section of wall that looked like decoration smooth wood, no handle. A fingerprint panel glowed softly at her touch. The hidden door clicked open. Inside was a narrow cabinet holding only a few things no one else knew about. A frayed winter coat, its fabric pilled and tired. A pair of worn shoes with thinning soles. A canvas bag with faded seams and one loose thread that had never been mended. Artifacts from another life. Her first years in America. Before Aurora Tower. Before headlines. Before anyone knew her name. She reached in and lifted the coat. The fabric made a dry, rustling sound, then settled heavy over her arms. She brought it to her face. It still smelled faintly of cheap detergent and street air, of steam from Chinatown kitchens, of nights waiting for the bus with wet hair and numb fingers. The smell carried echoes of the young woman she had been working late in a bakery cleaning until her back ached counting tips and coins. She remembered how people in suits used to brush past her. "Excuse me. No, you go around. Watch it." They never looked closely enough to see her. She'd been invisible then. And in the lobby of her own tower not long ago she had felt that all over again when a woman in a worn coat came in from the rain and faced a wall of cold eyes. If I walked into my own building like that, she thought, what would they see? A human or a problem? The question pulsed quietly, frighteningly honest. It wasn't a cinematic revelation. It was small, precise, almost scientific. A test. Not of them, she realized. Of everything. Of the culture she'd built. Of the world she operated in. Of whether there was any kindness left that wasn't bought, traded, or staged. Because if there wasn't, what had her entire life been for a tremor fluttered across her chest? She pressed her palm there, breathing slowly until the rhythm steadied. Then a decision formed in the stillness. She would disappear for one night. Not into some exotic retreat, not behind a new alias on a balance sheet, into the woman she used to be. No driver, no assistance, no security, no silk armor. Just an old coat, worn shoes, and a body that hurt more than she let on. She dressed without ceremony. She unbuttoned her tailored blouse, folded it along clean lines, and placed it on a nearby chair. The sound of the fabric sliding over upholstery was soft final. She slipped into an ordinary cotton shirt, pulled on the frayed coat, stepped into the worn shoes, feeling the thin insoles press into familiar spots on her feet like ghosts of old calluses. She pulled a knit cap low over her hair, wiped away her makeup in the bathroom until a more honest face stared back. The woman in the mirror looked smaller, older, exposed. Her skin showed the fatigue she usually hid under flawless foundation. Her eyes looked like they'd watched too many sunrises from the wrong side of sleep. This is who I was, she thought, and who I could be again if everything collapsed. The thought surprised her with its honesty. She flicked off the bedroom lights as she walked out, one click after another, the penthouse growing darker, room by room. The only glow left came from the city outside, filtered through glass. At the elevator, her finger hovered over the button for the lobby. Old muscle memory pushed it. When the doors opened on the gilded entrance level, she pulled her hand back before stepping out. Not yet. She watched a tenant in a tailored coat glide past, phone to his ear, not even glancing at the elevator. Another woman in heels laughed into her headset, the sound sharp but hollow. If she stepped out like this, would any of them recognize her? Or would she simply become one more shape at the edge of their peripheral vision? Her heart stumbled once at the thought. She closed the doors and pressed the button for the garage instead. The elevator hummed downward, the numbers lighting up like a countdown, not just in floors, but in status. Penthouse, executive, tenant, parking. The doors opened into the cool echo of concrete. The smell of exhaust hung in the air, mixed with faint tire rubber and old rain. Somewhere, a car door slammed. A radio played too loudly in a distant vehicle base, thudding through the structure. She chose the ramp, not the elevator, back up. Each step up the incline made her breath hitch, the familiar tightness returning. She paced herself, counting silently. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. By the time she reached street level, the wind had picked up. People moved faster now, heads down, collars up, each person inside their own private storm. To them, she was no one. A taxi splashed filthy water onto her shoes. The driver didn't notice or didn't care. A man in a sharp suit bumped her shoulder hard enough to spin her slightly. "Watch it," he snapped, never breaking stride. "I'm sorry," she murmured to the air. A group of teenagers stood near a storefront, loud and electric, their laughter popping in the night. One lifted a phone. "Bro, look at her." Someone snickered. "She looks rough." She didn't know if the camera captured her or not. She didn't look long enough to find out. The city she had helped finance didn't see her now, didn't slow down for her, didn't rearrange itself around her name. There was something brutally honest about that, and brutally lonely. She walked 3 blocks like that, just another sound among footsteps, another rustle of fabric in the wind. By the time she reached the corner near Aurora Tower, the air had turned colder. The rain that would later hammer the lobby had not yet fully arrived, but the promise of it hung in the clouds. From across the street, her building glowed. Aurora Tower. Her tower. The automatic doors shimmered under warm interior light. People in coats stepped in and out with ease badges, flashed greetings, exchanged a soft murmur of conversations she had designed but never really been part of. She stopped under the awning across the way, listening. Through the glass, the lobby sounded muted. The low roll of luggage wheels, the hushed tap of shoes on marble, a distant elevator chime. Outside, a gust of wind rattled a loose metal sign, adding a harsh little clatter to the scene. She hugged the coat tighter around herself. This is not a game, she reminded herself. This is your life, your building, your last big question before the clock runs down. Her heart beat harder, not irregular this time, just loud, present, demanding to be heard. What if no one is kind? What if the answer is no? She swallowed, forcing down the fear. "I need to know," she whispered, barely audible against the city's hum. "Whatever it costs, I need to know." She stepped off the curb, crossed the street, and walked toward the revolving door of Aurora Tower, not as the billionaire whose name crowned it, but as the woman the world thought it could ignore. Her palm touched the cool glass. On the other side, a receptionist laughed at something on her screen. A security guard shifted his weight board. Someone in a charcoal suit adjusted his tie, already annoyed at the sight of a wet stranger heading his way. None of them knew who she was. None of them planned to care. And somewhere deep inside the building on a service level, no one important ever visited. A janitor refilled his thermos with ginger tea, completely unaware that tonight his mother's lessons were about to be tested too. Jinyi drew one steady breath. Then she pushed the door and stepped into her own tower as a nobody, not yet knowing that the next voice she heard speaking softly in her mother tongue would begin to change everything. Morning crept into the penthouse like a hesitant visitor slipping through the sheer curtains, brushing lightly across the marble floors. Zhao Xinyi hadn't slept. She had spent the rest of the night sitting in silence, ginger tea still lingering faintly on her tongue, the janitor's voice replaying in fragments she couldn't shake. My mother was Chinese. They treated her like she was dust. If I can keep one person from feeling that way, I have to try. Why did those words cling to her so tightly? Usually when people spoke to her, their voices carried an angle, admiration, calculation, fear, ambition. But his voice had none of that. It was quiet, almost tired, carrying a tenderness that didn't belong to a man who spent his nights scrubbing floors in a tower that bore her name. Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, pulling her from the memory. "Ms. Zhao, there was a small incident last night. Security sent a report and they'd like you to review the footage." Xinyi's breath caught. Footage. Of her. Disguised. Vulnerable. Trembling. "Send it to my private monitor," she said carefully. A moment later, the screen on her desk flickered. The image appeared, the lobby camera angled down toward the marble floor. She watched herself, coat-soaked shoulders hunched, hand gripping the counter to stay steady. She watched the disdain on her employees' faces. She watched the guard's impatience, the receptionist's sharp tone. Then she watched him, the janitor, Ethan, speaking to her in Mandarin, helping her sit, guiding her into the service hallway with a gentleness she could still feel on her arm. Jinyi pressed her lips together, a strange ache in her chest that had nothing to do with her heart condition. Something deeper, something old. Her assistant appeared again. "Would you like to increase security measures? Perhaps update the access protocols?" "No," she said quickly. "Too quickly. Just leave the file. I'll handle it." When the screen blinked off, she exhaled slowly, the tension leaving her shoulders inch by inch. Then she said something she hadn't said in a long time. "Bring me the employee file for the janitor." Ethan Cole. A pause. "Yes, Ms. Zhao." Soon after, a digital folder slid into her inbox. Jinyi opened it cautiously, as if afraid of what she might find. The first page contained a headshot Ethan several years younger, clean-shaven, tired eyes, but softer. Then the documents unfolded like chapters of a life no one had bothered to read. Former freelance interpreter. 2 years working with a nonprofit helping Asian immigrants navigate legal paperwork. Mother deceased cancer. Marriage ended shortly after. Now supporting a younger sister with chronic illness. Financial strain. Debt. Work history of odd jobs until landing the janitorial night shift at Aurora Tower. Her chest tightened with a different kind of pain, an emotional throb that came from knowing something wasn't right in the world but not knowing how to fix it. She whispered, "Why would someone like you end up invisible in a place like mine?" Before she could think further, her assistant's voice interrupted again. "There's also this note, ma'am. He carries a notebook. It's mentioned in his HR profile." "A notebook?" "Yes. Apparently he practices Mandarin phrases in it. Ones his mother taught him." Jinyi's breath caught. Suddenly she saw him again in that service hallway, reaching for his lunch bag, offering ginger tea, speaking to her in a tone she hadn't heard since her own mother was alive. And she wondered what kind of boy he must have been, watching his mother suffer indignities, remembering every moment, carrying them into adulthood like an invisible scar. Is that why he helped me? Because he saw her in me, or saw me in her? Her assistant knocked lightly before entering. "Miss Zhao, the board has moved your strategic planning meeting. Should I rearrange your schedule?" "Not now. Not after everything she'd just uncovered." "No," Jinyi said softly. "Clear my morning." The assistant blinked, surprised. Zhao Xinyi never cleared mornings, never cleared anything. But she left without asking questions. Left alone, Xinyi rested her palm gently on her chest, not because of the heart condition, but because she could feel the emotional shift happening beneath her ribs. A quiet stirring, a pull towards something she didn't fully understand. She wasn't done watching. She clicked through the surveillance feed from the previous night. There, another angle. Ethan leading her into the hallway. Ethan rushing back out after a moment to grab tissues. Ethan returning with water, moving with urgency but not panic, just enough worry to make him human. Then another angle, this time the hallway camera. She saw herself drinking tea, saw him noticing every tremor in her hands, saw the patience in his posture as he waited for her breathing to slow. She pressed a hand against her mouth. He saw me. Not the disguise, not the shabby coat. He saw the person inside it. The memory tugged her back in time, back to Shanghai, standing beside her mother outside an upscale restaurant. They had dressed simply that day, nothing extravagant, but a hostess had turned them away with an apathetic smile. No reservation, she'd said. But Jinyi saw the truth in her eyes. Her mother squeezed her small hand and whispered, "It's all right, Jinyi. Their hearts are the ones missing something, not ours." Her mother had believed in kindness even when it wasn't returned, a belief Jinyi had buried under billions. Her eyes warmed unexpectedly. She blinked the feeling away. If her mother were alive, she would have said anyone who treats strangers with tenderness is someone worth listening to, maybe even trusting. But as the thought formed, another surfaced beside it. I want to see him again. Not as the billionaire he unknowingly sheltered, but as the woman he chose to help. The idea pulsed like a heartbeat, dangerous, irrational, and yet somehow necessary. But then her phone buzzed with a new message from the building's night manager, Ms. Zhao. Just an FYI camera flagged a janitor letting a homeless woman into restricted areas last night. We're considering disciplinary action. Her pulse spiked. They were talking about her, and they were ready to punish him. Anger rose in her chest, quiet, sharp, entirely unlike her usual corporate calm. For a moment she considered writing back, immediately revealing everything. But no, not yet. This wasn't a moment for anger. This was a moment for clarity. She needed to understand Ethan fully, his intentions, his pain, his life, before she stepped in, before she changed anything, because her decision wouldn't just affect him. It would affect the entire tower, the entire system she had built. She took a slow breath, letting the air steady her. "I'll need to see him again," she whispered, but not as Zhao Xinyi. Her reflection in the dark monitor looked back at her, a woman torn between two lives. One powerful, one invisible. And for the first time she wasn't sure which one she belonged to anymore. The next evening slipped into the city without thunder or drama. It was the quiet kind of night, the kind that felt like it was waiting to see what people would choose. In her penthouse, Zhao Xinyi stood at the hidden cabinet and found her pulse with 2 fingers. The beat was irregular, but not wild. Manageable. For now. She took out the old coat and canvas bag again. The fabric rasped as she pulled the sleeves over her wrists. In the mirror, the polished billionaire vanished. The woman, looking back, could have been anyone on a bad night, drawn tired, carrying more weight in her chest than in her hands. "I have to know," she thought. Was his kindness an accident, or is that who he really is? And is there any humanity left in this place at all? She rode the elevator down. Penthouse executive levels, tenant floors, service corridors. Each soft chime nicked another chip off the armor she'd spent decades building. By the time the doors opened, she felt less like an owner and more like a trespasser in her own life. This time, she didn't go to the lobby. If she was going to test the world she'd built, she wanted to see how it behaved when no one knew it was being watched. The parking level smelled of cold metal and old rain. Engines idled, tires hissed on wet concrete. A valet glanced up, saw her coat and bag, and immediately looked away. "Excuse me," she said, keeping her voice calm. "Is there somewhere I could sit for a minute? I'm not feeling very well." "Ma'am, this area isn't open to the public," he said without stopping. "You can't stay down here." A delivery worker pushed a cart past and steered wide, one hand fluttering in a half-hearted shooing motion. "Try a shelter, okay. You're gonna get security called on you." Shelter, not help. A problem to move along, not a person to care for. She swallowed the sting and climbed the ramp toward the loading dock. The air turned colder, laced with diesel and wet cardboard. 2 men were cutting plastic wrap from stacked crates. "Sorry," she tried again. "Could I stand here for a moment?" "Just until, don't block the ramp," one muttered, not looking up. "We're working here," the other added. "You can't just hang out. Keep moving, ma'am." Workflow, she thought, not human flow. Her chest tightened, that familiar squeeze. She pressed her palm flat against her coat, focused on her breath. In. 2, 3. Out. 2, 3. Not now. Not here. She turned into the internal loading hallway, the narrow fluorescent-lit artery that connected the unseen side of the tower. The lights buzzed overhead. Pipes hummed in the walls. Somewhere down the line, a dryer thumped in a slow, steady rhythm. Halfway along, she saw it. His cart. Buckets stacked neatly. Mop propped beside it. A pair of gloves folded on top. Ordinary and visible to everyone else. To her, it looked like a small anchor dropped in rough water. Before she could get closer, voices floated from an open break room door. "Is she back?" someone whispered. You mean that homeless woman, another voice replied. Yeah. Guy from the garage said he saw her again. Management's ticked, a third voice said. We're supposed to tighten exits. No more strays wandering around. Strays. Her face burned. She had spent years turning this tower into a symbol of her success. Tonight, inside its own walls, she was being discussed like an animal someone forgot to chase off. She stepped back until she was out of view. Then, a familiar voice called gently down the corridor in careful Mandarin, Ni hai hao mei? Are you still okay? She froze. Ethan rounded the corner, a rag in one hand, a small thermos in the other. The light carved shadows under his eyes, but his gaze was the same, steady, quietly concerned. You're back, he said softly. For a heartbeat, she wanted to say, I shouldn't be. I'm putting your job at risk. I read the email about tightening security. I could stop this with one phone call. But the disguise held. The test held. The rain, she murmured instead. I didn't know where else to go. He studied her like someone checking glass for cracks. You didn't look well the other night, he said. You still don't. You shouldn't be out in this cold. No one wants me anywhere else, she said. They keep pushing me away. He let out a quiet breath. Yeah, he said. I've seen that. He nodded toward a small equipment alcove near the dryer. Come on. I brought extra tea tonight, just in case. Those 3 words landed like a hand on her shoulder. Inside the alcove, the air was warmer. The dryer's heavy, steady thump filled the space grounding and oddly comforting. Ethan unscrewed the thermos and poured steaming ginger tea into a paper cup. He put it in her hands. Slow sips, he said. It helps. The smell hit her ginger and something faintly sweet. For a moment she was in her mother's kitchen again, small and safe and wrapped in steam. Why do you keep helping me? She asked quietly when everyone else tells you to send me away. He leaned back against the wall, thinking. Because I don't want to be one of them, he said simply. When you're invisible in this world, it means everything when someone looks at you and really sees you. Doesn't matter who you are. You deserve that. Her throat tightened. You talk, she said, like you've been invisible too. He smiled, a little tired around the edges. Yeah, most days. Her hands shook around the cup. He noticed and reached out, covering her fingers with his own, steadying the drink. Careful, he murmured. The world's hard enough. Don't burn yourself trying to hold everything alone. She wanted to tell him that she had been holding everything alone for decades, that the weight of an empire was sitting in her chest along with a failing heart. Instead, she asked, That first night, why did you sit with me? You could have walked away like everyone else. He met her eyes. Because you looked lonely, he said. Not dangerous, not annoying, not a problem. Lonely. The word dropped straight through her, landing in a place she hadn't let anything touch in years. Her eyes burned. She blinked hard. No one has said that to me in a very long time, she whispered. Most people don't notice loneliness, he replied, unless they've lived it. For a while, they just breathed in the same small space, listening to the dryer's rhythm, to the soft hum of the building, to the quiet between them. Then pain cut through her chest. Sharp, fast, merciless. Her fingers spasmed. The cup jolted. The room tilted sideways. Hey, Ethan said, immediately dropping to his knees beside her. Is it your heart? She could barely get air. Panic flared hotter than the pain. Do you need an ambulance? He pressed. She shook her head hard, fear spilling into her voice. No. Please. No hospital. I just need a moment. He wanted to argue, she could see it, but he met her terror and adjusted. Okay, he said. Sit. Back against the wall. Come on. He guided her down, one hand steady on her elbow. The metal of the dryer was warm against her back. Breathe with me, he said quietly. In through your nose. 1, 2, 3. Out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3. They breathed together. Slowly, the sharp edge dulled into a heavy pressure. Her hands stopped trembling quite so much. When she could finally draw a full breath, he exhaled with her relief softening his shoulders. "You can't keep doing this," he said gently. "Whatever you're running from, it's tearing you up." The truth of it settled over her like a blanket she didn't know she needed. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed down the main hallway, short-clipped, irritated. The kind of walk used by people who like to remind others who held the keys. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Stay here," he whispered. "Please." He stepped into the corridor. She waited a beat, then eased to the edge of the doorway close enough to hear. "Cole. My office. Now." The night manager. She'd seen his name in reports, heard his tone in emails focused on efficiency, on image, on risk. Their footsteps moved away. A door opened, closed. At first the voices were muffled, then the words began to bleed through the thin wall. "What were you thinking?" She was freezing. She needed help. "That's not your job. She wasn't hurting anyone. You don't bring vagrants into restricted areas. She's a person, and you're a janitor, not a saint." The last line landed like a slap across her own face. Her fingers dug into the paint. "Listen," the manager went on. "We've got camera footage. You've been letting her in multiple times. Tea-water sitting with her in back corridors. This isn't a shelter. You're creating liability for the tower." Ethan's voice was tired, but he didn't back down. "She was shaking," he said. "She looked like she'd pass out. Helping her was the humane thing to do." "Humane," the manager scoffed. "You're here to mop floors, not rescue strays. If you want to keep your job, this stops. No more tea, no more conversations. Next time you call security." "Understood." Silence stretched. Then Ethan answered quieter but firmer. "I won't mistreat someone just to keep my job." That the manager snapped is exactly how people end up unemployed. You're one mistake away from being replaced. Don't test me. A chair scraped, papers rustled. The conversation ended with a flat, "You're dismissed." The door opened. Ginny stepped back as Ethan came down the hall. His face was composed, but his shoulders were pulled tight like he'd wrapped himself in his own restraint. "You heard," he said. She nodded, her voice stuck somewhere between her lungs and her heart. "I'm so sorry. Because of me, you don't," he said softly. "This isn't on you." He tried to shrug it off, but the gesture fell halfway. "This is what happens when you go against the grain. You try to help, and someone above you decides it's the wrong kind of help." "You could lose your job," she whispered. Maybe he said, "I've lost more important things." "Like what?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He hesitated, then let the words go. "My mom," he said quietly. "When she got sick, I took too much time off. Lost work, lost my marriage. People said I cared too much in the wrong direction." Her chest ached for him, for the boy he must have been watching the world dismiss the woman who raised him. He went on, voice low. "I learned something then. If you stop helping people because you're scared, you become part of what scared you. You shouldn't have to choose between kindness and survival," she said. "Most people do," he replied. "They just get used to it." The dryer kept thumping, counting out a rhythm that suddenly felt precious. She looked up at him, eyes stinging. "Then why keep helping me?" she asked. "Why risk it?" His gaze met hers, tired but unwavering. "Because if I walked away from you," he said, "I'd be walking away from who I'm trying to be." The sentence settled between them, solid and undeniable. He lifted a towel from his cart and wrapped it gently around her shoulders, rubbing her arms to bring the warmth back. "I'll help you as long as I can," he added. "But you should know they're watching. They're looking for reasons." "Because of me," she whispered. "Because they don't understand compassion," he said. "That's not your fault." Someone called his name from upstairs, another spill, another broken thing that needed quiet fixing. "Duty calls," he said with a small, tired smile. "Stay here a few minutes. Let the tea finish its job, then take the side exit. Less chance they give you trouble." She nodded, fingers tight on the towel. He walked away, his footsteps fading into the hum of the building. When the hallway was quiet again, she lifted her gaze. In the corner of the ceiling, a small red light blinked on a security camera. Watching. Recording. Turning everything that had just happened into clips and timestamps and liability reports. Her test was no longer a private experiment. It was evidence. Enough, she thought. The next time I walk into this tower, I won't be a ghost in an old coat. I'll be Zhao Xinyi, and I won't be the only one answering for what this place has become. Morning rose over New York like a curtain of pale gold, but inside, Aurora Tower tension buzzed through every hallway. Staff rushed across the lobby, adjusting their ties, fixing their hair, straightening their jackets with hands that trembled slightly. Something important was happening, something big enough to put everyone on edge. The rumors spread fast. The CEO is coming today, Zhao Xinyi herself. She never comes unannounced. Must be a board thing. Or a crisis. Xinyi stood in the back of her private car watching the reflection of her own eyes in the tinted window eyes that had seen far too much these last nights. Today she wasn't wearing the old coat or the frayed shoes. Today she wore her armor, the crisp white suit tailored to perfection, the delicate earrings, the clean lines of influence. The transformation felt strange, almost unnatural after the night spent in anonymity. Her assistant peeked through the open door. "Ma'am, everything is ready. The leadership team has gathered upstairs." "Good," she said quietly. "Let's start." Her heart wasn't racing, but it was awake. Every beat reminded her why she was here, why today mattered. As she stepped through the lobby entrance, the shift was immediate. The same guard who had barked at her 2 nights ago rushed forward with a forced smile plastered on his face. "Ms. Zhao. Welcome back. Let me help you." The receptionist nearly dropped her pen trying to stand at attention. "Ms. Zhao, we're honored to have." But Xinyi walked straight past them. No greeting, no smile, just a calm, quiet walk toward the elevator, leaving the scent of expensive perfume in her wake. Behind her, whispers rose in a wave. She looked serious. "Did someone mess up, God? I hope it wasn't me." Only one person didn't rush to greet her. Ethan. He stood near a maintenance closet at the far end of the lobby, dressed in his uniform, mop in hand, head slightly bowed as he cleaned a streak on the marble floor. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. He felt her presence like a shift in temperature, but he had no idea she was the woman he'd offered warm water and ginger tea to. No idea she was the one management wanted him to stop helping. No idea she had watched every moment of their encounters through security feeds with an ache growing deeper each day. She slowed for half a second. A tiny pause, just long enough to let her gaze rest on him, and he finally looked up. Their eyes met briefly, quietly, painfully before she stepped into the elevator and disappeared behind closing doors. He stared at the closed doors, confusion tightening his chest. Why did she look at me like she knew me? Upstairs, the executive conference room thrummed with nervous energy. Department heads stood in a stiff line near the back wall. The night manager shifted uncomfortably in his too tight suit. The receptionist and the guard stood further away, unsure why they had been summoned at all. Miss Zhao, the COO, said, voice overly bright, "We're ready to begin. Whenever you—" "I want the recordings," she said, cutting him off. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. "The recordings, ma'am. The surveillance from the lobby and service hallways for the past 3 nights. Put them on the screen." No one dared to question her. Within seconds, the footage lit up the enormous wall monitor. There she was, drenched, trembling, gripping the front desk. There was the receptionist, looking annoyed, lips tight with impatience. There was the guard stepping toward her, hand on his radio. And then there was Ethan, walking toward her with a mop in one hand and a steady voice that cut through every cold thing in that lobby. The room fell silent. The second angle played the service hallway. Ethan kneeling beside her, offering tea. His voice soft with concern. His hands steady around her shaking shoulders. His patience. His kindness. His humanity. Then came the final clip, the night manager berating him in the office. You're a janitor, not a saint. No more kindness. One screw-up, and you're gone." The COO cleared his throat nervously. "Ma'am, we can explain that." The employee was, "You will not interrupt me," Ginny said calmly. Her calmness was more terrifying than anger. She turned first to the receptionist. "Is this how you treat someone who asks for a glass of water?" The young woman swallowed. I didn't know who the woman I thought she was." "You thought she wasn't worth kindness." Ginny finished for her. Then she turned to the guard. "Is this how you protect the people in this building?" "I was just doing my job," he muttered. "Your job," she repeated slowly, "is not to strip people of dignity." Then she faced the night manager. He broke into a sweat the moment her eyes settled on him. "Ms. Zhao, I didn't know. That's exactly the point," she said. "You didn't need to know who she was to treat her like a human being." Silence suffocated the room, and then she turned not to the executives, not to the guards, but to Ethan, Mr. Cole. He looked stunned that she even knew his name. She switched effortlessly into Mandarin. "Nin, Jide, Wo Ma. Do you remember me?" His eyes widened. The realization hit him like a tidal wave, sharp, overwhelming, disorienting. The woman he'd helped. The woman he'd given tea. The woman he'd protected from cold stares. The woman he almost lost his job over was the billionaire owner of the building. He straightened slowly, uncertain whether to apologize or run. Shinyi held his gaze gently. "You were the only one who saw me." That single sentence shook the entire room. Then she turned to the executives. Her voice remained soft, but every word carried weight. "There are consequences. There must be." Everyone braced. To the culture of this building, she continued, not just to individuals. She dismissed the night manager on the spot, suspended the guard and receptionist pending retraining. Then, before anyone could react, she turned back to Ethan. "Mr. Cole," she said, "effective immediately, you are promoted." He blinked. "Promoted. Yes. To Community and Human Experience Coordinator. You will help reshape how this building treats every person who walks through its doors, tenant, employee, guest, or stranger." He stared at her, stunned. This must be a mistake." "No," she said softly. "It's the first thing that has felt right in a very long time." A hush fell over the room. No one dared speak. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so that only he and the trembling room could hear. "Instead of turning your back on someone cold and alone, you chose to sit beside them. Now, I choose to stand beside you." The room inhaled sharply. But the real cliffhanger came in the moment after. Because Ethan looked at her with something fragile and conflicted in his eyes. Not gratitude, not awe, but fear. Fear that this promotion came with a truth he wasn't ready to face. Fear that he still didn't know who she really was beneath all that power. And fear perhaps that kindness had just changed his life in ways he wasn't prepared for. The elevator doors closed with a soft sigh as the last executive slipped out, leaving Ethan standing alone in the vast conference room with its skyline view and its suffocating silence. Moments earlier, dozens of eyes had been on him, judging, whispering, calculating. Now the room felt strangely hollow, almost echoing with the aftermath of what had just happened. A janitor promoted in front of the entire upper management. A billionaire revealing she had been the invisible woman they all ignored. A power dynamic shattered in a single morning. Ethan wasn't sure whether to sit to breathe or to run. Shinyi watched him from near the window. She stayed still, giving him space, letting him gather himself. The city sprawled beneath them like a cold metal ocean, yet this room felt warmer than anything she had stood in for years. She finally spoke, quiet, careful. "You're overwhelmed." He let out a shaky laugh that didn't quite sound like humor. "That's one word for it. You think I made a mistake," she continued. He didn't answer. His eyes drifted toward the door, then to the floor, then back to her. I don't know what you want from me, or what this is. She nodded slowly. Fair. He rubbed his palms together, restless. I don't belong in those meetings. Did you see their faces? They looked at me like I was tracking dirt into a cathedral. They don't decide where you belong, she said. You do. He met her eyes for the first time since the reveal. There was no fear now, just raw honesty. I'm just trying to keep my sister's medical bills paid. I'm not someone who changes corporate culture. I'm barely someone who gets through a rent cycle. Her expression softened. Tell me about her. He hesitated, but something in her tone invited trust. Her name's Lily, he said quietly. She's 22, but she's had health issues since she was a kid. I take care of her the best I can. Some months are harder. I work extra shifts. I do what I have to. His throat tightened. You ask why I helped you. Because I know what it looks like when the world decides someone isn't worth the trouble. Her breath caught. The ache behind her ribs flickered again, deeper this time. Not the medical kind, but the emotional one. The one she didn't know how to name. Ethan, she said gently, you didn't help me because of who I am. You helped me because of who you are. That matters more than you realize. He shifted uneasily, absorbing her words like someone who wasn't used to hearing anything good about himself. She turned and walked toward the seating area near the window. Come. Sit. We need to talk. He followed hesitantly. The moment he sat down, she took a breath, gathering courage for something she wasn't used to sharing, not with anyone. I need you to hear something. Personal, she began. He looked at her, attentive, uncertain. I'm sick, she said simply. My heart. Doctors say stress is killing me faster than time is. He blinked, startled. I didn't know. No one knows, she whispered. I've hidden it, buried it under work, meetings, deals, but I can feel it every day now. She rested her palm lightly against her chest. The pain, the fear, the loneliness. He leaned forward, his voice softer. I'm sorry. Truly. She nodded, appreciating the sincerity in his tone. When I walked into that lobby disguised and invisible, I wasn't just testing the people who work here. I was testing the world, testing myself, and maybe testing fate a little. He swallowed. Why? Because I wanted to know, she answered quietly, if there was still any goodness left in the world that wasn't tied to my name or my money or what people could gain from me. She looked at him fully. And you answered that question. He looked away, overwhelmed again, but this time not from fear, from the weight of her honesty. Silence settled between them, thick with unspoken things. Then she shifted, slightly leaning back as if preparing herself for a leap. I want to build something with you, she said. He blinked. With me? Yes. Something meaningful. Something human. She folded her hands. A program. A foundation. A place that teaches kindness, not just efficiency. A space that supports people. The world pushes aside immigrants, service workers, people living unseen. He stared, stunned. You want me to lead that I want you, she said slowly, to be the heart of it. He shook his head. But I'm not. I don't have training or degrees or... You have lived the thing I'm trying to teach, she interrupted. Compassion, empathy, courage, and the humility to do the smallest tasks with dignity. Those are not skills you can manufacture. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. What if I fail? She held his gaze. Then we fail together, but it will be the right kind of failure, the human kind. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't speak. Then a breath left him like letting go of something he'd held too tightly for years. She reached into her bag and slid a tablet toward him. A rough draft of a proposal filled the screen. Across the top, in elegant font, Human First, a center for compassion in service. He stared at the title, then up at her. You wrote this minutes after you left the hallway last night, she admitted. His heart thudded, once unexpected, powerful. No one had ever shaped a vision around his actions before. No one had ever looked at him and seen potential instead of limitation. "How would this even work?" he asked quietly. "With you advising. With me funding. With both of us shaping the culture of this tower and others like it." Her voice lowered, sincerity threading through every word. "You helped me when you thought I was nothing. Let me help you now because I know you are something." Emotion hit him before he could stop it. He pressed a hand to his face, overwhelmed. Not embarrassed, just moved beyond measure. She let him feel it. She didn't rush him. She didn't fill the silence. She simply sat with him the way he had sat with her in that cold hallway. "One more thing," she said gently. He lowered his hand. "You won't be alone in this." Then, more quietly, "And neither will I." Something shifted in the air, something quiet and profound. Not romance, not yet, but connection. Real, fragile, true. But just as the moment softened between them, her assistant knocked sharply on the glass door. "Miss Zhao, you're needed. The board wants answers about your announcement." Jinyi exhaled slowly. "Of course they do." She stood, smoothing her suit composure, sliding back into place like a practiced reflex. But before she stepped away, she looked back at Ethan. "Come to the boardroom with me." His eyes widened. "What now? Yes," she said. "If they want answers, they'll hear them from both of us." And as he rose, hesitant but resolute, neither of them knew the storm waiting behind those doors, or how much it would test them. The walk toward the boardroom felt longer than it truly was. Every step echoed through the executive floor like a warning. Ethan walked beside Jinyi, but slightly behind her, the old instinct of a service worker still tugging at his posture as if he didn't belong in hallways with velvet carpeting and glass walls worth more than his yearly salary. When they stopped outside the boardroom, he hesitated. "Are you sure you want me in there?" he asked quietly. "They already think you've lost your mind promoting me." She turned to him, voice steady. "They'll think whatever makes them comfortable. But comfort isn't what we're doing anymore." Then softer, "I don't want to walk in there alone." Something in her tone made him swallow the protest rising in his throat. Before he could answer, her assistant pushed the door open. 12 board members turned at once. The room was bright stark, dominated by a marble table and an entire wall of windows offering a sweeping view of Manhattan. Yet the air inside was cold with skepticism, cold with calculation. The chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. Zhao, thank you for joining us so quickly. We have questions." Jinyi stepped in first. Ethan followed. A murmur rippled through the room. "Why is he here? Is that the janitor? This is highly irregular." Jinyi lifted a hand, silencing them with effortless authority. "Mr. Cole is here because this conversation involves him." The chairman folded his hands. "With all respect, your decision this morning was impulsive. Promoting a janitor to a corporate-level position without review, it undermines our structure. And the media is sniffing," another board member said. "We've already received inquiries asking about you disguising yourself as a homeless woman to test your staff. They're saying it's a publicity stunt." A woman at the far end added sharply, "or a misstep in judgment." Ethan flinched not visibly, but enough for Jinyi to sense it. She took a breath. Her voice, when she spoke, held calm steel. "I didn't disguise myself for publicity. I did it because I wanted to see how this building, my building, treats those who have nothing to offer." She scanned the room. "Most of you failed that test." Silence. The chairman leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Compassion is admirable, Ms. Zhao, but it doesn't keep this company profitable. Investors won't respond well to these theatrics." Jinyi's jaw tightened. "If you call basic humanity theatrics, then we have a bigger problem than I thought." A different board member spoke, voice colder. "And why is a janitor standing in a board meeting? What qualifies him for any of this?" Ethan felt heat rise to his face. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Jinyi stepped slightly in front of him. He's qualified because he did the one thing none of your polished resumes mention: he acted with integrity. The room stiffened. One man scoffed. Integrity doesn't run a multi-billion-dollar tower. No, she replied sharply, but it keeps the people inside it human. A beat of stunned silence followed. Then the CFO leaned forward. With all due respect, Ms. Zhao, if you continue down this path, funding humanitarian programs, elevating untrained employees, refusing conventional oversight, you risk losing your position. There it was, the unspoken threat, laid bare in the middle of the room. Ethan felt the air collapse in his lungs. They were threatening to take everything from her. Because of him. Because she dared to care. His voice was barely a whisper. I can leave if this is putting you at risk. No, she said instantly, not taking her eyes off the board. Your presence isn't the problem. Their vision is. But the chairman pressed on. We need stability, not philosophical experiments. Jinyi lowered her gaze briefly, only briefly, and when she lifted it again, her voice changed. Softer, clearer, braver. Stability, she repeated, almost killed me. Confusion swept across the room. She took a slow breath. I have a heart condition. Serious. My doctor told me I might have 2 years left if I don't change my life. She placed a hand lightly on her chest. Stability gave you profits. It gave the world another cold tower. But it robbed me of joy. It robbed me of time. No one moved. No more, she said. I will not spend the rest of my life building structures that house thousands of people but protect no one emotionally. Not when I know better. Not when I've seen what compassion looks like. Her voice dipped into something raw. Not when a janitor showed me the humanity I forgot. The room exhaled, quiet, shocked, shaken. But resistance was stubborn. The CFO tried again. Ms. Zhao, while we sympathize with your condition. No, she cut in. Don't sympathize. Understand. She straightened, grounding herself. If this board cannot support a program designed to train our staff in kindness, respect, and cultural empathy, then I am willing to step down as CEO. Gasps broke out. The chairman's eyes widened. You would walk away from your own company if what I stand for no longer aligns with it, she answered simply. The weight of her words hung like a storm cloud. And then a knock came from the glass wall of the boardroom. Heads turned. Outside stood a small crowd: front desk staff, custodians, security guards, baristas from the lobby, cafe clerks from the mailroom, people from the building's lowest tiers. People who rarely looked up, rarely stepped into the executive world. But they were here. Because word had spread. About the woman who walked the tower in old clothes. About the janitor who helped her. About the CEO willing to fight for them. One woman from the front desk held up her phone playing a video. A halting voice came through the speakers. Zhao was kind to us before she was ever kind to investors. A security guard added, She paid for my daughter's college books 2 years ago. Quietly, no one knew. Another staff member said, She sat with me during a panic attack when I thought I'd lose my job. A delivery worker added, She listens. That's worth something. One by one, voices rose, small stories, tiny moments, memories of humanity the board had never seen. And Ethan watched as Jinyi's shoulders trembled once. Just once. The chairman cleared his throat. It seems, he faltered, taken aback. It seems the people support you? Then, shockingly, a major shareholder spoke, a woman with sharp eyes but a soft expression. I lost my husband last year, she said. Kindness kept me afloat. Ms. Zhao is right. We've forgotten the value of it. I support the program. Another investor nodded. As do I. Slowly, hesitantly, but clearly the tide turned. The chairman sighed, defeated but begrudgingly respectful. Very well. The program moves forward. Under your leadership and Mr. Cole's. Ethan felt something squeeze in his chest. He didn't breathe until Jinyi looked at him with quiet triumph. The meeting ended with ripples instead of applause, but something had shifted, something irreversible. As the boardroom emptied, Ethan and Jinyi were left alone for a moment, the noise fading. He whispered, "You were willing to give up everything." She stepped closer, her voice low, warm. "I wasn't giving up. I was choosing what matters." He swallowed. "And what matters?" She held his gaze steady and unafraid. "You, this, the world we're trying to build." Before he could answer, her breath hitched a shallow, sharp pull of air. The pain returned. Faster. Stronger. Jinyi Ethan stepped forward quickly. She pressed a hand hard against her chest, and the world tilted. Her knees buckled. He caught her just before she hit the ground. "Jinyi," he shouted. "Stay with me, come on. Stay with me." Her breath trembled. Her eyes fluttered closed. And the chapter ended with a single sound, a frantic, helpless whisper from the man who had once saved her in a hallway. "Please. Don't leave." The hospital room was dim, quiet enough that Ethan could hear every shaky breath leaving Jinyi's body. Machines hummed in soft, steady rhythms, modern lullabies meant to reassure, but his hands still trembled as he held on to hers. The fear from the moment she collapsed was still lodged in his chest, sharp and unyielding. When her eyes fluttered open, pale and tired but alive, he exhaled as if he'd been underwater. "Hey," he whispered. "You scared me." She blinked slowly, studying his face with a kind of tenderness she'd never let herself show before. "I'm still here," she murmured. He brushed a stray strand of hair away from her forehead. "Don't ever do that again." She managed a faint smile. "I'll try not to collapse in board meetings." They shared a fragile laugh, one that carried relief exhaustion and something softer. Something that didn't need a name yet. A nurse stepped in, checked the monitors, and spoke gently. "Ms. So your condition is manageable, but only if you truly slow down. Less stress, more rest. You need a different kind of life now." The nurse gave Ethan a brief knowing glance before stepping out. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jinyi whispered, "I thought I could rebuild the world and outrun my own heart at the same time." "You don't have to run anymore," Ethan said softly. "Not from yourself, not from everything you've buried." Her eyes warmed with emotion. "Maybe that's why I survived. To finally stop running." He squeezed her hand. "You're not alone in this. Not now." 2 months later, Aurora Tower felt different. Not physically, the marble floors still gleamed, the elevators still glided silently. The skyline outside was still a constellation of ambition, but something in the air had shifted. Warmer, softer, and today the change would become official. Ethan stood beside the entrance of a renovated space on the mezzanine floor. Large windows filtered morning light across polished wood floors. A delicate scent of tea and fresh paper drifted through the room. Staff tenants and guests murmured with curiosity as they gathered. Above the door, gold lettering spelled "Human First Center." A place where kindness wasn't assumed, it was taught, practiced, lived. At the front of the room, Jinyi stood poised but peaceful, wearing a simple cream blouse instead of a corporate suit. Her heart medication had steadied her rhythm. Her new schedule had steadied her spirit. She looked lighter. She began speaking, her voice soft but steady. "When I was a child," she said, "my mother used to tell me that the value of a person is not measured by what they can buy, but by how they treat those who cannot give them anything in return." She paused, scanning the faces in the room. "For many years, I forgot that. I became consumed by building towers, building wealth, building an empire. But in doing so, I neglected to build the one thing that matters most: connection." People nodded gently. Some lowered their eyes, touched by the truth in her voice. She continued, "Then, one night, disguised and alone, I walked into the tower that bears my name, and discovered that the world I built did not see the invisible." She turned toward Ethan, who was watching her with quiet pride. But one man did. One man chose to offer warmth instead of judgment, humanity instead of suspicion, a cup of tea instead of indifference. A ripple of emotion spread across the room, and that moment, she said softly, changed everything. She gestured toward the space around them. This center is our new beginning, a place to remember that empathy is not a luxury. It is a skill, a discipline, a choice we must make every day. She stepped back, giving Ethan the floor. His heartbeat pounded in his ears as he moved to the front. He wasn't wearing a janitor's uniform anymore, but a simple button-down shirt. Still humble, still himself. He cleared his throat. "I don't have fancy words," he said, "but I do have my mother's lessons." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small notebook he always carried, the one filled with Mandarin phrases. "She taught me how to greet someone in their language, to see people who didn't think they were worth being seen, to listen before judging." His voice grew steadier. "I spent years thinking those lessons didn't matter, that no one cared. But now," his voice caught, "now I know they're the most important thing I have to give." He looked at the employees standing in front, the ones who once rolled their eyes at the idea of compassion. This place isn't just for customers, it's for us. For all of us who need reminders that dignity belongs to every person who walks through these doors, even on their worst day. A wave of nods, soft murmurs of agreement. A small, elderly Chinese woman wandered into the room just then, clutching a handwritten note. She looked confused, scanning the signs with uncertainty. Ethan moved toward her, but someone else got there first. The new front desk trainee, the same young woman who had once turned Xinyi away, knelt slightly and spoke in careful Mandarin, her accent imperfect but earnest. "Nin zhu yao bang zhu. Ma. Do you need help?" The older woman brightened instantly. "Xiexie ni tai hao lei. Thank you, you're so kind." The trainee guided her gently to a chair, offered warm water, and asked how she could assist. Xinyi felt her eyes sting. That was the transformation she had dreamed of. Not a policy, not a slogan, a culture, a woman who once turned people away, now welcoming them with warmth. A life changed, a lesson lived, a legacy begun. Later that afternoon, Ethan found Xinyi on the rooftop garden she rarely visited when she was CEO. Today, she stood near the railing, the spring breeze brushing her hair gently, her heartbeat calm. He approached quietly. "You did something good today." "So did you," she replied without turning. "So did everyone." He moved beside her, hands resting lightly on the railing. "How's your heart?" She smiled, placing a hand over it, learning to beat at a human pace again. Silence stretched comfortable this time. "I used to think wealth was something you collect," she said. "Numbers, properties, power." She looked over the city, then at him. "But real wealth is what grows in other people because of you." He nodded. "I used to think my job was just cleaning up after others. Now I know some messes aren't on the floor." She laughed softly. "Maybe we clean the world together now?" He turned to her, eyes warm. "We already started." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft gold and amber, the same colors that marked the very first night she walked into the lobby alone. Except, now she wasn't alone. "Ethan," she said quietly. "Yes, thank you," she whispered, "for choosing to see me when I was invisible." He reached for her hand gently, respectfully, and she didn't pull away. "And thank you," he said, "for teaching me that one act of kindness can change an entire tower." They stood there together above the city that had shaped them, healed them, broken them, and finally brought them back to themselves. And, in the narrator's final words, "We are all richer than we think. Not because of what we own, but because of what we choose to give. A greeting in someone's mother tongue, a warm cup in cold hands, a moment of courage when judgment is easier. In the end, kindness builds towers no skyline can ever surpass." As we close this journey, take a moment to breathe in the quiet message woven through every chapter. Kindness is never small. Compassion is never wasted. And every human being, no matter their title or their struggle, deserves to be seen. Maybe you've met someone like Ethan, someone whose gentleness changed the direction of your day. Or maybe you've been that person for someone else without even realizing it. And maybe there was a moment in your life when you were the one who needed help, and a stranger stepped forward with a gesture so simple yet so powerful it stayed with you for years. If this story reminded you of something you've lived, if it brought back a memory, a night, a person, a lesson, please share it in the comments below. Your story might be the exact light someone else needs tonight. And while you're here, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know how far this story has traveled and how many hearts it has touched around the world. If you felt moved, inspired, or healed in any way, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story waiting for you. Another reminder that humanity at its core is still beautiful. Thank you truly for spending your time with this story. Thank you for listening with an open heart, for feeling deeply, and for allowing this tale to walk beside you for a little while. Until the next journey, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and never underestimate the quiet power of kindness.